Why do I give some credibility to the story of the Anunnaki based on the Sumerian text as well as the Emerald Tablets of Thoth? As well as there are other texts in the Kemetic language and the Aztecs, the Mayans, that would also complement the Anunnaki story. But I do have my barriers that I won't cross with the Anunnaki story just yet. You see, according to the Anunnaki story, the Kemetics, the Emerald Tablets, the Aztecs, the Mayans, as well as the Aboriginals in Australia, that after a grand cataclysmic event on Earth, there was a group of people with greater technology that appeared to be gods to the people who were remaining, and they came and restarted civilization in those places. Now, they went by many names, whether it was Enki, Thoth, Assur, or Osiris, whether it's Quetzalcoatl, the Sky People. They went by many different names, the Nomo. But the different names of these people does fit with the idea in the Sumerian text that there were different caste system levels of Anunnaki and Igigi. The most interesting part is that all these people around the world had this similar story around the exact same time frame, which is very important, which is different from your flood stories. Your flood stories happen at different time frames. But in and around the same time frames, these people were visited by some other deity that came from the sky, and they all drew similar images of those people. The serpent people carrying the bag with the pine cone, pretty much in the same position with the wings. So they had very similar stories and drew very similar people. They had similar drawings of the flying machines to which they were on. All those sorts of things happened. Now, when did this happen is the question. Well, there's the last ice age that we truly faced, worldwide ice age, occurred around 25 to 30,000 years ago. But during the latter portion of this ice age, around 15,000 years ago, the ice age got deeper and the survivability became less and less. You see, people were surviving this ice age when it first began 30,000 years ago, but around halfway through, we had this period of time from about 15,000 to 12,000 years ago. The ice age got deeper, it got colder, it covered more land, it was more destructive, killed more wildlife, more plant life, and so less survivability was available. But then, for some reason, we have no idea why, right around the 12,000 year mark, 12,000 to 9,000 year mark, something happened that the Earth heated up rapidly, whether it was a comet or meteorite strike, solar flares. We don't necessarily know exactly what happened. But each one of them talked at that time frame of the sea levels and flash flooding and storms and tsunamis occurring. And the sea levels rose 400 feet. Now, we do have evidence of the sea levels around that 12,000 to 9,000 year time frame rising 400 feet. So there was a lot more landmass. And considering that most people, even still today, live coastal, people then also lived more coastal. So most of them who were able to survive the Younger Dryas freeze would not have survived the Younger Dryas flood because it happened in like a 6-day period of all this flooding. And we find these in Altrahesis. We find these in some of the writings in with the Aztecs and the Mayans, the Skype with the what's the people called? The Australian indigenous Australians. So we find these similar stories. Now, where I draw the line is when the Sumerian story, the Anunnaki came from another planet called Nibiru. I am not so much in agreement with that they came from Nibiru, but I would be in more agreement that they came from previous civilizations that existed on Earth that were of a higher technologically base. They may not have been fully humanoid, but definitely bipedal. Could have been different, a slightly different genome than what we are. This is why each one of them have the stories of the sinking of Lemuria, the sinking of Atlantis, the sinking of Mu. All these great continents, these three great continents supposedly were world powers back then, but they were also low-level areas and they were covered by water during the last flood and would have struggled during the Ice Age. The Emerald Tablet speaks of Atlantis flooding and Thoth flying over the desert of the Sahara and landing in the land of Kim and restarting their civilization. Osiris is said to have got on a boat and went to the Mesoamericans, and he was called Quetzalcoatl. The Sumerian story also talks about at some point Anu sends out different Anunnakis to go out and start civilizations in the Indus Mountains, Indus area, into Peru, into Australia, into the Polynesian Islands, into all these places to restart civilization. The problem that I have with Nibiru, until we identify such a planet, I do not think that we've been visited by interstellar people, but that we are just seeing those who survived that time frame. And although the Sumerian story and other stories talks about them mixing their DNA with our DNA to elevate us so that we can be their slaves, and when you look at most religions of that ancient time frame, humans were in some form or fashion slaves to whatever deity it was. They served these gods, they fed these gods. These gods had bodies, they were corporal, they just lived a long ass time. And so we thought, or our ancestors thought, that these were gods since they lived longer for generations and generations of the lifespans of man. They all talk about the gods doing something to shorten man's life and to shorten man's intelligence because in fear of man not desiring to be a slave anymore. All these types of similarities is what brings me to the idea that is a possibility that some beings existed. But when we also look at all the UFO sightings that we've had over the centuries, whether it is the Pharaoh, I think Thutmose III, who's had a UFO sighting, whether it's Columbus who had a UFO sighting, Cortez, all these different UFO sightings, and in the ones that we even see today of Air Force pilots, they're either coming out of the sea or they're coming from Antarctica or somewhere like that, or Mount Shasta. They're always coming from Earth. They're most of the time, I'm not saying always, most of the time they're coming from Earth and they're not coming from outer space. We don't see them coming from the sky in the sense of burning through the atmosphere and then coming into Earth atmosphere and flying around. So therefore, that is why, for right now, until more evidence is given, they were pre-existing intelligent societies who suffered during the Younger Dryas and then made themselves superior to our ancestors. So y'all have a great day. And remember always, you got to free yourself to be yourself because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibration.